Hello, everyone. I'm just going to get right into it. This semester, I specifically try to experiment with new approaches to assignments and try out different mediums and programs in general. And I think the image class represents this quite nicely. I specifically wanted to get familiar with programs like Cinema 4D and Blender, so I decided to try to animate some 3D models, specifically having a 3D model sing the lyrics to a song as part of the music video assignment. While it was pretty frustrating at first, it eventually, of course, was super nice to start understanding how 3D models are built and work and how you can make them move and then layer those movements on top of each other to make them interact with each other. Yeah, I really want to continue working with this. And I guess I had a similar learning experience with creating the Latin typeface for letters. When discussing it the individuals, I remembered being at admission day and hearing that others are specifically trying to join the academy because of the focus on letters and typography, and me being perhaps a little irritated because I really didn't care at all about all of that. But now I'm scrolling down Instagram and getting super excited over ligatures. So yeah, just creating the typeface itself. I went from being a bit frustrated and quite overwhelmed with just using font editors to really enjoying it. Just experimenting with what you can do with letters and how you can change them and what you're maybe not allowed to change, and eventually putting all of that into perspective was pretty great. The publication redesign assignment in typography was really helpful in the sense of figuring out what is important to focus on to keep the reading experience interesting for people over a lot of pages. Now, this assignment was actually a bit of a struggle, but definitely one that was worth it. I started out with playing with ways the text could be placed on the page or be separated, but there was either no reason to do it in the way I was doing it, or it was just super inconvenient. So I made the decision to just kind of ignore that and continued with styling the publication, making it visually pleasing, but with nothing much changing throughout the book in itself at all. What I ended up with was a book that looked nice, but got pretty boring after just a few pages. After that, I just went on with making things a little complicated for myself by trying to come up with super clever and accurate ways with what could happen visually throughout the book, which didn't really work either. So, after discussing this with Rob and others, I finally took a few steps back to realize it's more about visualizing a general idea that doesn't necessarily have to fit to every page. So I made use of the elements I had already put on the page and used them to visualize the general idea of some development throughout the story. In this case, what I was focusing on is the downside to royalty. So the quite elegant lines around the text interfere with the text more and more, especially on instances where this is strongest. Out of that base, I then saw how I could potentially get more detailed and clever again. So in the end, this assignment was really nice for shifting focus when approaching an assignment and not making things too complicated, keeping things interesting throughout a book, but also just typesetting in general. So, with being almost the exact opposite of planning out a concept for a publication, in the other, first film project in Image, I decided to focus a lot more on not having that very planned out approach. I realized, and this was also addressed in the feedback of the midterms, that my work is often quite very outcome oriented, with me developing a clear idea and me working towards that. While I definitely enjoy working that way, I do see that it is sometimes quite limiting and it can even be frustrating if things don't want to work out that way. So, with this assignment, I deliberately tried to go against that by picking a topic, which in this case is licorice, and a setting for which I chose 80s television. And I just let the content I found online determine the outcome and storyline of the video. Now, this did result in a pretty ridiculous video that I wouldn't necessarily show to others for the outcome, but it was really helpful in letting content influence the narrative, not the other way around. Now, of course, there's still a whole load of stuff I want to work on, but in terms of what I'd want to develop most, aside from the technical things I've already mentioned, like 3D work, I do want to work on clearly visualizing my ideas, conceptually speaking, and improving that. I also want to increase my visual outspokenness, getting somewhat more intense, more loud and messy with stuff. And I also think efficiency is always something you can work on. I think this concludes my little assessment video. Have a nice day and see you Tuesday.